Thursday afternoons, Marie would travel into town to do her weekly shopping. She shopped at a local Five and Dime, a store that had everything that she needed. On this particular day, she only needed a few items, for she had been stocked up from the week before. So she came to the counter and placed her items on the counter, and the man behind the counter, who had been used to helping her weekly, smiled and said, "Marie, is that everything?" And she nodded an affirmative yes. But behind her was her little boy. Her little boy snuck around looking at the man behind the counter, and the man smiled and said, "Son, before you leave, why don't you reach up here into my candy jar and grab yourself a handful of suckers?" This man was kind and generous, and he was able to help his customers and his friends and his neighbors as much as he could. But the little boy shook his head and said no. And so the man was then pressing him a little further and said, "Yes, go ahead, help yourself. Grab yourself a handful of suckers." The little boy nodded no again. Finally, the man himself reached into the candy jar himself, handed the group of suckers to the little boy, and the little boy smiled as he grabbed him from the man. As Marie walked out in the parking lot, she had to ask her son the obvious question. "Son, why didn't you reach into the jar?" Holding his handful of suckers, he smiled, and he said, "Because Mr. Johnson has bigger hands." My friends, today I want to talk to you about the concept of abundance. This week marks the week that we as United Methodist in the state of Missouri celebrate what we call annual conference. Annual conference is that opportunity for Methodists around our conference, around our state for this matter, to meet together to celebrate, to worship, to do some business items, but also to learn together. And each year, the Annual Conference Sessions Committee puts together a theme to help us understand the role that our church will have in the world over the next year. This particular year, we're gathering mostly virtually as we still make our way through issues of the pandemic. And as we gather together, we're going to be talking about this theme and this idea of abundance. In the opening story, the little boy wanted more, and he knew that he could get more from the hand of the man behind the counter. You and I, my friends, too often live our life in scarcity. We believe that there's just so much to go around, that there's not enough. But with God, there's more than enough. And God has abundance for you and for me. This is illustrated perfectly in the Gospel of John. In John chapter 10, Jesus begins to tell the story of himself as the Good Shepherd. And he talks about and uses an illustration of a sheep pen. And he says that those who enter the sheep pen by the gate are the ones who care for the sheep, primarily the shepherd. And when the shepherd comes into the gatekeeper will open the gate for him because the gatekeeper knows him and the sheep know them and they are freed. But then he also says that anyone who comes in the sheep pen by a different way is a thief. And the sheep will scatter because of his presence. They know he's there not to nurture and support and care, but he's there to hurt them, to harm them. In this particular passage in John chapter 10, verse 10, is one of the most fulfilling and abundant passages in all of Scripture. It's a simple verse, but it's a verse that can really be a foundation for who we are and what we do in the world. John 10:10 says this, "The thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. But I have come that I may give you life and that you may have it in abundance." The first portion of that describes the way of the world, describes those who are against us and those who come into our lives seeking to kill, steal, and destroy. But the second half of that verse is an incredible promise. That when we welcome Jesus into our lives, we find abundance. We find life to its fullness. A life that is giving, not stealing. A life that is full, not empty. A life that is restored and not destroyed. Too often we see things in our world that have lost their usefulness or have simply spent too much time in disarray, and we just throw it away. We think that it's not worth it anymore. But the powerful thing about God is that he wants to restore us, to bring us back to abundance. Over the last year, we have struggled in so many ways, being isolated and alone and thinking there's not enough. Not enough time, not enough community, not enough resources. We've seen scarcity in all aspects of our life. But I believe that God, from this moment forward, beginning this week, as we talk at annual conference, and as we begin to think about what the church looks like in the next year and the next phase of our life, God desires abundance. Abundance of people, abundance of resources, abundance of hope, abundance of grace, abundance with God. I hope and pray that you will reflect upon this meaningful verse and passage in John chapter 10, and that you will receive from the hand of God, like the little boy at the beginning of this devotion, abundantly what God desires for you, and that you will smile all the way as you enjoy that abundance and share it with the world. God bless you, and have a great day.